Good morning, everybody. Tuesday, February 3rd. We're so happy because Kyle's at Disney having a good time, and Michael and I get to hang out and try not to burn the company to the ground. Today, we're talking about tariffs, and we're also talking about legal decisions being made. The third story is always a thing. We want to talk about the third story before we talk about the third story. But South Carolina kind of proposed a bill to let some people build and sell cars in their state. We won't talk about who it is until later. But Michael, we have one of your countrymen on the show today. Is that how you say it?
Is it me? Am I?
No.
Am I one of my countrymen on the show?
No. Well, I guess you're one of his countrymen. We have Global Automakers of Canada
Yes.
President and CEO David C. Adams on with us in just a moment. It's fun. You and I got to speak with him actually yesterday. In the midst of all the conversations happening about tariffs, I felt like for a moment we were right in the center of the news.
Yeah, and I mean, who better to talk to than someone who leads an organization, an association that works directly with, 4 or 5 major automakers who are building vehicles right inside the country. So I'm pretty excited to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, before we get into the stories, just want to remind you that ASOTUCON.com is live. You can get your tickets to ASOTUCON. I'm so excited that we already have a bunch of tickets sold for this event. And I've heard that we have some delegations from some other countries aside from Canada showing up from across the pond, as they say. So it's actually turning into a bit of an international event, which is not what we would have expected. I do say. That was really good. It was really good. So make sure you get your tickets as early as possible. One of the reasons is they are as cheap as they will ever be right now. So ASOTUCON.com, head out there, grab your tickets now. We're going to be introducing a ton of speakers, a ton of sessions, all the fun, all the fanfare, and obviously all the insights. You don't want to miss it. How many products? We were talking about how many products like that are now full-fledged tech products. The idea for the product started on a stage at ASOTUCON last year.
When's the last time anybody in our industry could say something like that? Like, that's a pretty bold statement.
Yeah. Well, actually, we should make a list one time and just get the people to say, oh, so a dealer said this on a panel and we got together afterwards and here's
just
the product.
One time, though. I never want to revisit that list ever again.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's get into some news. So President Donald Trump announced a temporary suspension of planned U.S. tariffs on Mexico yesterday after reaching an agreement with Mexican President-elect Claudia Sheinbaum. The deal includes Mexico deploying 10,000 National Guard troops to the northern border, or its northern border, our southern border, with a primary focus on stopping fentanyl trafficking and furthering negotiations on security and trade. So Trump was going to put this 25% tariff in place. It was supposed to go in effect midnight starting February 4th, like midnight, like 6 hours ago. Yeah. But agreed to pause them in exchange for Mexico's commitment for increased border security. U.S. officials from the state, Treasury, and Commerce departments are going to lead further discussions, with Trump saying he will participate.
First, can I just say, tell me you're an entrepreneur without telling me an entrepreneur. You're like, on the 4th, the 3rd, the 2nd, the what?
What day is it today?
And then you're like, I've been married 20 years? When did that happen?
How'd I get here?
Now, speaking of picking fights with Canadians, like, we love hockey, right? Like that's what keeps coming to my mind.
It's
I'm like,
the
we're
only
not afraid
sport
of a
where
body
fighting
check.
is actually part of your statistics.
Yeah, it is. I mean, see, and widely adopted by all organizations. We all want hockey stick growth.
Yeah.
Can I just jump in and make a little minor observation that after President Trump's second call with Trudeau yesterday that happened just around 4 p.m., he left that call to go meet with the Florida Panthers, a hockey team who won the Stanley Cup.
No way.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, is this a conspiracy theory brewing
I
on the
don't
morning
know.
show?
I'm not sure.
Guys, all roads are leading to me being that dude in his 60s who wears oversized Wrangler khakis, a fleece shirt and fleece vest, and who operates ham radios. Like, I'm just going to go up.
he's already digging a hole so he can bury the school bus with an oxygen filtration system in it.
Yeah, I'm
like all his neighbors in
International
Texas.
Space Station on my ham radio because I just to get away from it all.
Speaking of tariffs,
Stop. Segue.
Time. Well, that didn't take long. On the northern border, U.S. tariffs on Canada are going to be postponed by 30 days as the two countries have negotiated a border deal, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of Canada said after finishing a second call with President Trump. So yesterday we were definitely throughout the day saying, is it going to happen with Canada? They're getting on the phone, they're meeting. In the meantime, we were able to sit down and talk with the president and CEO of Global Automakers of Canada, David C. Adams, about the industry and what the northern perspective is on all of this. The situation is to begin with. He had a great statement yesterday. He said, quote, "The United States and Canada aren't just each other's largest trading partners, but we actually build things together, not for each other." He said, "There's no other industry where this is the case more than the automotive industry, where we have had sectoral free trade between the two countries since 1965. I like the sound of this guy already.
Yeah, we got to dig into this conversation with him so you can hear what he has to say.
All right, we are here with President and CEO of the Global Automakers of Canada, David Adams. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Paul and Michael. Appreciate it.
Okay, so there's obviously a whole lot going on. As of time of recording this interview, it is in the afternoon on Monday. So we know right now there's a big high-stakes meeting going on between President Trump and Mr. Trudeau, and they're figuring it out. They're talking about things. Maybe we'll have some news by the time this releases the next morning, but maybe not. Without a doubt, a lot of talk, a lot of fear, a lot of resolve going both ways as these tariffs have been threatened, placed. I don't even know where they are. They're just kind of going into effect potentially. We hear everything from the American side. Obviously, our partners on the Canadian side affect both parties, and we thought it'd be great to get some perspective from the Canadians and from you and yourself. How are automakers looking at this? What is the feeling and the sentiment around dealers, and how are you preparing to potentially deal with tariffs so that we can keep serving customers?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, but let's start by saying, look, where we are right now, as the president has indicated, again, that could change as a result of the conversation that the prime minister and the president are having as we talk, basically. But as it stands right now, the president plans on enforcing tariffs on essentially all products from Canada as of this evening, I guess, coming into effect at 12:01. And Canada, on late Saturday evening, the prime minister announced a package of $155 billion in retaliatory tariffs, if you will, with first tranche potentially going into effect on February 4th as well. That would be $30 billion. And then the government will be undertaking a consultation on what other products that could potentially form the rest of that $125 billion that would be applied to U.S. imports. So rapidly heading into a tariff war, unless this can be averted. And it's, I know it was just perhaps one piece of news in the U.S., but if you're watching Canadian TV, CBC, CTV, streaming like all day Saturday on what about the tariffs and what this means for Canadians. So it's, it's a salient issue in the hearts and minds of, I think, all Canadians at this point in time.
Can you
I was going to say something that I think is so unique about Canada-U.S. relations in particular is that here you have two countries that could essentially, by all stretch of the imagination, self-suffice without any trade between the two, right? Canada makes its own automobiles. It has fresh water and minerals and lumber and oil and then you have America just south across the border, which has lumber and minerals and oil and could potentially make its own vehicles. So what do you think they're really trying to get at? What's your opinion on what they're really trying to figure out here? Is it the quote unquote unfairness, as they've said, or do you think there's an underlying issue that they're really trying to expose?
Yeah, I guess what I would start with is your premise there, Michael. And I think the reality is that we're interdependent. We need each other, and perhaps maybe Canada needs the U.S. more than the U.S. needs Canada. But the reality is that for things such as electricity, oil, I think you guys get something like about 60% of your oil imports come from Canada. So critical minerals, and you can say, well, those are necessary for the EV industry. Well, okay, maybe the president doesn't care that much about EVs, but he does care about national security and being able to build planes and defense equipment and steel and aluminum. Aluminum is a major export into the United States. But, by the same token, I think there's about 34 U.S. states where Canada is the largest market for those states. If you look at Ontario alone, where I'm based, if we were our own economy, we would be about I think it's about the third or fourth largest economy that trades with the United States. So, look, we've had a long history of having an integrated economy, building things together. And that's no more is that truer than in the automotive industry, as opposed to building things for each other. So automotive industry, you wind the clock back to 1965 when the Auto Pact was first signed, which was the first stage towards free trade, sectoral free trade in the automotive industry. So we've had again, like we're talking 60 years of experience of building those industries together, building vehicles together, having parts in Canada go into components in the United States, coming back to finished vehicles in Canada and vice versa. So I guess my message there would be is that you're not hurting one side of the border without hurting the other side of the border with tariffs. And I think that will come home to roost. And we've already seen some statements coming out of some of the auto trade associations in the U.S. saying that these tariffs are highly ill-advised.
I think I like your sentiment there. And I do think that the people who are kind of caught in between all of this, right? If there are deeper issues that people are trying to like move across and like get the point across, the reality is the industries in both countries, respectively, the auto industry does genuinely believe we're better together. And so, and that's, I think, one of the most beautiful things about business in general. Business finds a way to cooperate, finds a way to make things work, finds middle ground, because that's kind of the premise of doing global business or doing international business. Can you give us a little overview of what your position actually entails? Because I'm sure our audience is not familiar. And if you could just give us a summary of what your purview is as the president and CEO.
Yeah, well, I think just to highlight for your viewers, listeners, our industry association, we have 16 member companies. 2 of those member companies produce vehicles in Canada, Honda and Toyota. There are 5 companies that actually produce vehicles in Canada, Honda, Toyota, Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis. So we have some of the producers, and there's another trade association that has the remainder of the producers. But I think from our perspective as an association, we've always taken the position that tariffs are anathema to growing an economy. They are essentially a tax on business that ends up getting passed on to consumers. They end up impeding economic growth. And I think these are all the things that we will start to see, as these tariffs play out, unless we can get some speedy resolution to this, which is what we're all hoping for. I think the president had a discussion with the president of Mexico earlier today, and I understand from that discussion, Mexico essentially got a stay of execution with respect to the tariffs for another month because they agreed to. I think they've committed 10,000 troops to the border. Made some commitments on fentanyl and who knows what else. And I think the problem for everybody is that it's very unclear to Canadians, to Mexicans, and to perhaps the European Union, who he's supposedly coming after next. Kind of what do you want? What will satisfy you? And it's been fentanyl and the illegal migrants coming over the border for Canada and Mexico. But I would argue from a Canadian perspective, look, it's magnitudes of difference between Canada and Mexico. If you look at fentanyl, for instance, I think U.S. stats show that it was about 38 pounds that came in from Canada and 11,000 pounds or more that came in from Mexico. So we're 0.01% of the fentanyl problem. Does that mean that we shouldn't do anything? Well, no, absolutely. I think our governments have always worked collaboratively together to safeguard the border and to also streamline the border, because both of our economies depend on one another for the trade that we talked about earlier on.
I've always been curious about this piece. So they announce a tariff. Is it as quick as like you see it on the next invoice?
Great
like
question.
How quick does it actually show up? How quickly do we assume that price or that tax, as you've suggested, that gets passed on to consumer is recognized?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'm not sure that I've got a complete answer for you. But what I do know is that some companies will say, "Well, I don't want to be in a position where I'm passing all of that onto my consumer, so I'll eat a portion of it for a bit." They might not be able to do that forever, but reality is that it will at some point get passed along to the consumer. In terms of when it actually impacts goods crossing the border, for instance, my understanding of the situation is that, the executive order has been given. There would have to be some, I think, guidance documents, if nothing else, put together for border officials and that kind of thing. And can that all be done between, Saturday when the tariffs were announced? And,
we have ChatGPT now, so right. David, our time is just about up, but I have one, probably the most important question. Do Canadians watch the Super Bowl, and if so, who are they rooting for this year?
Well, they do watch the Super Bowl, but the tied to our discussion is everybody's talking about how much more the avocados and the beer is going to cost because of the tariffs. So, I think it'll be a good game, and I think it would probably depend on the Canadian, who they think might win the Super Bowl. But
regardless of the familiar color with one of the teams, I would argue that the best team is the one that is not red.
Well, I'm trying to think now, Dave, who in our league has the reputation of the cheating Chiefs? Is it the BC Lions? Is it the Tiger Cats? Like who do we give that title to?
You're asking the wrong guy. I don't follow football that much. I follow hockey. So we want to talk hockey.
Who do we give it to? Is it the Maple Leafs, or is it the Stampede, or is it the Calgary Flames? Is it maybe the
Look, I'm just surprised you got all those names for the different teams there.
Yeah,
Michael.
listen to him go.
When
he's just flexing
Jets.
now. He's just bragging.
All the Ottawa Senators.
As a son of South Philadelphia, I welcome all of Canada to be Eagles fans next Sunday.
Eagles fans. There you go.
Oh, well, Dave, this has been such a joy. Thank you so much for joining us, certainly on late notice. Dave Adams, the president and CEO of Global Automakers of Canada. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, guys. Anytime. Appreciate it.
I don't know where you got a hat in between this interview or not. Is this your Canadian hat or your Texas hat?
There's my Calgary Stampede hat.
Oh, is that your Calgary accent as well?
No.
No.
I can't do it anymore. We were at NADA and everyone said, "You sound like you, but Texan." And I was like, "Oh, okay."
I wonder now I'm wondering that if this is kicked down the road for, what was it, a month? 30 days on both
30
sides?
days.
I really don't feel like it's going to happen. And I think we'll see what the markets do. Are the markets going to respond? The announcement came after the markets were closed yesterday. This is before they're open. So I kind of feel like this is like a foregone conclusion. Is that what they say?
Yeah, I think, well, there's a couple of things here. I want to go back to what you quoted from Mr. Adams earlier about how we build things together. I'm like, here's an individual who, before we met with him, he said, "Hey, give me a little bit of a rundown on ASOTU More Than Cars. Like, what do you mean? Where did this come from? What did it stand for?" And he had no context, yet deeply rooted in his being, in his mode of operation. He knows that the automotive industry of all industries is one that builds together, works together. And I thought that was kind of an inspiring kind of third party validation of what we all believe in our community in the auto industry. The second thing that came to my mind is just look at what happens when you pick up the phone. You know, just answer the phone. Look, we can avoid so many things if we don't just always do text and email follow-up and 7-day follow-up, this and that. Like, pick up the phone and talk to the people. You can solve big problems.
I like that. Speaking of trying to solve some big problems.
Stop. Segue.
We'll see. We'll see.
What is the big problem we're trying to solve?
Well, South Carolina. Sounds like is solving big problems.
They like to solve big problems. Let's talk about this. So South Carolina is making waves as a new bipartisan bill aims to allow direct-to-consumer EV sales. If passed, this could be a game changer for Volkswagen-backed Scout Motors, which is set to build a massive $2 billion plant in the state.
Couple of bucks.
Current franchise laws ban direct-to-consumer vehicle sales. The new bill, the South Carolina Consumer Freedom Act, would change that, as the bill specifically applies to automakers that have never had a franchise dealership agreement. So what do we think is the thing here? Dealers aren't happy. The South Carolina Automobile Dealers Association strongly opposes the legislation, claiming it unfairly benefits Scout Motors. And previous efforts to allow direct EV sales in South Carolina have failed, with a similar bill in 2019 not advancing past committee. If passed, the new bill could set a precedent for other states with similar restrictions. While Governor Henry McMaster has not taken a position, he told local media that he supports, quote, anything that is good for the consumer, close quote. And of course, a Scout spokesperson said in a statement to Automotive News, quote, right now, outdated blanket government restrictions render direct sale impossible. Ironically and sadly, the people who build Scout vehicles won't be able to buy them under current regulations, close quote. Whoa.
All right, so it's getting sporty. Nathan, can you look up to see if Tesla is allowed to sell direct to consumer in South Carolina? He's going to look that up.
Sure, I will get on that right now.
I mean what do you think? $2 billion. And it seems like another one of these things where the government's kind of skirting around dealerships. And of course, the dealers are not happy about this.
You know, this is just adding fuel to the fire in the debate whether or not Scout is a full derivative of Volkswagen, which it is.
Right.
There is shared leadership. The funding for the new company came from VW. And so dealers, I think, rightfully have a bone to pick, saying, we've been asking you for trucks for years. You went ahead and you took our good leadership and the dollars you made from our stores, you used it to fund this other company. And now you're going to sell these products that we've been telling you our consumers want.
Yeah.
Outside of our ability to do so. Not only that, but it's going to compete with us. South Carolina is in a tricky spot though, right? Because you have a company that invests $2 billion in your state. And that's a viable reason for you to want that company to be able to sell their products in your state. So, I think it's not an easily solvable problem. I mean, from a dealer standpoint, what we think is that Scout should be able to be sold through the franchise network, and some select VW dealers should have the opportunity to run Scout, sell Scout products. I still don't know how they're going to service these products.
Yeah.
And so I we'll have to see. I mean, the bill hasn't passed, but it has been presented. Nathan, did you find out whether
I did.
Teslas?
So there are several states still with bans on direct sales models, including South Carolina. The other ones are Alabama, Arkansas, Connecticut, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Nebraska, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Texas, West Virginia, and Wisconsin.
Wait, it's not banned in New York?
It is not.
Well,
New York has store limits.
Oh, that's interesting, because in New York, what Tesla did in the central New York region near Syracuse, where Nathan and I live, is that they just did the same play that tobacco companies did. They just sold their products from Native American, reservations. So it's not U.S. soil technically. It's Native American soil. So there's a big Tesla store and a big Tesla hub on a reservation here in upstate New York.
You know, who doesn't love a good loophole?
Yeah. I mean, that is just the industry that we're in right now. But without a doubt, we'll see if this one passes. But dealers absolutely have a legitimate complaint.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, and I understand South Carolina like trying to not get in the middle. There's going to be no way to really win this one. I think the only way to get a win-win is for Volkswagen to realize the value of the dealer franchise network and start to spread out distribution. They might be in for a little bit of a rude awakening because it takes a lot of money and time to build brand credibility from the ground up. And they're just starting from scratch. Like no one really remembers what a Scout is. I didn't know until they released the EV version, and I'm 45.
I mean, you know, at the end of the day, you say Scout to me, and I just go, I think of wearing a beret and a woggle and saying, we will dib, 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 and dob, dob, dob. And I got no interest in that anymore.
That sounds like a Canadian thing I don't understand. On that note,
we're about to find out all the Canadians that watch the morning show.
That's true. Sure. I think we've done enough damage for today. Look, whatever's happening out there, tariffs, laws, whatever, you can count on one thing is when you serve the people, things tend to go a little better for you. We'll see you tomorrow.